the ones who sleep alone. During my junior year of college, I was on a bit of a bender. My high school girlfriend finally called it quits for the third time, and the lure of the one-night stand caught in the sweaty mist of beer and perfume was too much for my angry brain to withstand. I was a decent-looking guy back then, built tall and broad with pale eyes that more than one girl compared to sea foam. I also carried a forlorn look about me that was not entirely calculated, and so it took minimal effort for my reptilian brain to wire the right coordinates towards the triangular patch so coveted by many. In other words, I was a bit of a douchebag. Time blurs the journey from cocky frat boy to settled husband, and I can't outline all the steps for you, but there was perhaps one night that stood out amongst the others. It was a Friday or Thursday, I can't recall, but I was attending some smoke-filled stage on Halloween night where the lights dimmed the caked-out flesh and smoothed them into blank faces and bodies. I had met a girl, a nice slip of a thing with purple-dyed hair and thick mascara to match. But underneath all the clownery I could see she was beautiful, and that intrigued me. Sometimes you get hot, sometimes you get cute or fine, but you rarely get beautiful. The night had ended, and I generously agreed to walk to her back to her home. That was odd. I remember that she lived with her parents who happened to be near campus. But no matter, arm in arm we swayed through the peaking lights, her one arm settled so lightly on mine. Bethany, she had whispered in my ear, and my swoony brain tried to keep this name midair. At some point we redirected ourselves and conveniently were placed outside of my single. I glanced over at Bethany and realized with some annoyance that she was in no state for shenanigans. No, though her eyes were bright with drink and adrenaline, her head was drooping down. Fine, be it as it may. I was a bit of a douchebag, but I was not a rapist. I tried to get her to tell me where she lived, but she was starting to doze. And so we found ourselves in my bedroom, at 2 a.m. Good intentions, I swear. The buzz was wearing off on me too, and I was settling on a futon, while the girl was safely in my box spring twin. Classy guy that I was. I had only dozed for perhaps a minute when I jolted awake. I glanced up to see Bethany sitting upright, combing her hair back with her fingers and muttering something to herself. I jumped up and sat on the bed, still safely away while taking a temperature of the mood. "Hey, you okay?" "Can't sleep," she said, which seemed incongruent with her state 5 minutes ago. "Can you stay up with me?" There was something in her voice, timid like a child knocking on her parents' door, which indicated the night would not take me the way I was hoping. Fair enough, I had snipped that cord of hope well before we even set foot inside the apartment. But what was this now, about staying up with her? "What do you want to do?" I asked. Her silence was prolonged and awkward. Through the dim light, I could just see her features, delicate with hair hanging down her face. Beautiful, remember? But also young and scared, and she reminded me a bit of my sister. There was a game we used to play, called the 100 Lights, and perhaps inspired by this I offered this option. We could tell each other ghost stories. Bethany glanced at me. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, a bit embarrassed already. "Just something my sister and I used to do when we were kids. We called it the 100 Stories based on an old story. You were supposed to light 100 candles and take turns telling stories. After each story, you extinguished a candle, so that by the end, you were in pitch darkness. Then a real ghost was supposed to come." My paramour not to be glanced around. "Well, where would we get 100 candles?" I laughed. "Well, obviously we didn't light any candles. But we improvised. We could start with the bathroom light, for example, then the desk lamp, and the overhead light, and so on. Kind of a fun way to end the night, no? And in the spirit of Halloween. Okay, but on one condition." Bethany looked away. "You have to draw the curtains tight." It was a bit odd, but it made sense, I suppose. I flicked on all the lights in my bedroom and drew the curtains tight over the window, guaranteeing pitch blackness when all was done. As I jolted the curtain shut, I glanced at 2 lampposts shining dimly in the misty night air. Below, shadows flickered and I shivered, thinking about what might be out there. Somewhat invigorated by this new game, I launched into the first story, a classic about a boy who finds a tail and learns of the creature that it belonged to. After finishing it, I stood up and flicked off the light to the living room outside. The room was still bright and Bethany, who was looking as sober as ever, smiled at me. Her story was refreshingly creepy, about a demonic cat that slowly killed off family members, one by one. I couldn't ever recall hearing it before. Upon finishing, she stood and walked over to my desk lamp, shutting it off. As she walked by, I caught a whiff of her perfume and I marveled at how the theme of the night shifted so much. My turn. A story about vampires in a small town. I kind of cheated as it was based on one of my favorite stories by one of my favorite authors. Then Bethany went and told a weird story about a ghost that swallowed people's souls and turned them into lunatics. The details of this story escaped me, but I remember it was more weird than scary. I finished my next story and was just about to turn off the last light, which hung over the bedroom, when Bethany pointed to my DVD player, still glimmering its time in the dimming room. That first. Somewhat chagrined at being told about my own game, I complied. Bethany launched into yet another story about a giant who rose from the earth and killed a small boy. Much detail went into vivid descriptions of rending flesh and splattered guts, and if it were bright enough, she would have seen my mouth hung open. Okay. I started when she finished, and moved towards the final light, but her head shook again like a sudden blur. She pointed to my cell phone. Oh. The blinking light. She wanted it off. A sense of dread crept down my spine, but I shook it off. Wasn't this just some random party girl I picked up? We were playing some weird children's game, true, but I came up with it, not her. Somewhat impressed by her dedication, I switched my cell off. My turn. I told a quick, almost banal story about nothing much at all, just to get it over with. Then, as an almost act of defiance mixed with humor, I went to my kitchen and unplugged the fridge. There, I thought with satisfaction. Two can play at this game. There was just one light left, and it was Bethany's turn. The overhead light in the bedroom cast a faint glow over her features. In a low monotone, she launched into it. Once there was a young girl who was never allowed to leave the home. Her parents were very strict and enforced a curfew every night. Thinking that her parents just had old-fashioned values, which may have stemmed from her older brother's untimely suicide years ago, this girl began to rebel in high school. She would stay out longer and longer and test her parents' limits, finally electing to spend one night locked in her science lab at school. When she woke up the next day, she opened the door to find her father waiting for her. To her surprise and somewhat horror, he had tears in her eyes. "Dad, what is it?" the girl asked. "Honey, it's time you knew." The father explained to the daughter that the reason they never let her spend the night away from home was because of what happened to the girl while she slept. You see, there was a curse in this girl's family, passed from generation to generation. The women in the family, when they fell asleep they changed. Changed? The girl asked her father. What do you mean changed? We never really know what it is like when we sleep, do we? Even in the presence of others, when we sleep we are unaware of ourselves. Maybe we all briefly change, matter changing into something else. How do we know? We are asleep. But the father continued, some of us change for longer than that. We change into things that beget unspeakable horrors. The girl laughed. Are you implying that when I fall asleep, I turn into some kind of monster, like a Medusa? I only wish, her father said. We know what Medusa looks like. This is something more, something that has no words. At that point, he began to weep loudly, and for a second, the girl's incredulity was briefly shaken. She, of course, began to experiment. She set up a video camera at night. But every night, like clockwork, she would turn off the camera right before she fell asleep. She never remembered this, mind you, she just watched herself the next day get up and move over and hit the off button. It was as if whatever lived in her had a desire to survive, and so ensured it would never be caught. It was then the girl began to believe her father. One night, before bed, she knocked on his door. As she walked in, like a light bulb, she realized that her parents might sleep separately for reasons other than what she assumed. Dad, have you ever seen Mom change? Her father looked at her with wide eyes. No, he whispered, but your brother did. The girl never again stayed away from her parents' home. She always ensured she was in bed like clockwork, at a reasonable hour, away from the eyes of others. And so all were safe. As the story ended, Bethany looked at me. Wordlessly, she got up and flicked the last switch off. The room plummeted into a deep darkness. Nice story, I wanted to say, but I found myself unable to speak. Bethany was silent, and I heard her yawn and lie down. Within a minute I heard the rhythmic breathing of her slumber. I sat immobile in the dark. Somehow, the darkness seemed to deepen around the direction of my bed. I heard muffled breathing that grew deeper and coarser and felt something stir where Bethany was lying. It rustled and moved slowly in my direction. I wanted to move, I wanted to scream then, but nothing would come out. The rustling grew louder, and I felt the sheets of the bed slide off. And then, just as abruptly, the rustling slowed and stopped. The coarse breathing also abruptly ended. There was dead silence. My hand twitched towards the light switch, but I otherwise sat still. It would be hours until morning. When the Halloween decorations start bleeding. Am I going to be charged with murder? The detective sighed and did not answer. His eyes were tired, haunted. Just help us get to the bottom of this, he said. Okay, I answered. I'll do my best. I could hear the tremor in my voice. I hadn't stopped shaking since it happened. I'd had a strong drink to settle my nerves. It hadn't worked. Let's start at the beginning, said the detective. You were having a Halloween party. Yeah, I said. We do it every year. We take turns hosting, and the whole block participates. This year it was our turn. So you're the one who set up the decorations? Yeah, I said. Oh God, that sounds bad. But it wasn't just me, it was lots of people. I was mostly just supervising. Can you give me a list of who was involved? Yeah, it was, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Just give me a moment to calm down, I can give you the list. That's okay, we can come back to that. Okay. So who was it that set up the scarecrow? It was me, I said. But I didn't, I didn't do that. I set it up the night before. Someone must have come in during the night and... Oh God. The room swayed, and my breath came sharp and fast. My heart ratcheted up its pace to breakneck speed, and darkness began to close in around my vision. Hey, the detective said, just calm down. You're hyperventilating. Take long, calm breaths. I did as he said. My heart slowed, but the panic remained. Thanks, I said. Do you think you can keep going? He asked. Yeah, I said. Just give me a moment. My body convulsed with tremors, but in a few minutes, they had settled down to a mild shaking in my hands. I gulped down a hard knot in my throat. Okay, I said. I'm ready. So, the scarecrow. The detective prompted. The word filled me with dread. The scarecrow. I repeated numbly. It's a Halloween tradition. The neighbors said as much. You destroy it every year? Yeah, I said. Usually it's filled with candy and straw. Like a piñata. The kids beat it with sticks, and everyone has a good time. I just don't understand. God, why would someone do that? It's too early to speculate, said the detective. Right now we are just gathering the facts. When did you notice that something was wrong? Well, right away I noticed that the scarecrow wasn't coming apart as easily as it should have been. But I just thought that I had put it together too well, so I grabbed a stick and... Yes? I took a swing. The detective leaned forward. And then what happened? My shoulders slumped. My mouth was cottony and dry. And then, I said, the scarecrow began to bleed. And there was a pregnant pause. The detective's eyes bored into mine, willing me to continue. He said nothing, and I had to fill the silence. It fell over. I said. The hat came off, and we saw that it was a body. What happened then? The kids started screaming. One girl started it, the Oakley girl I think, and then they all went off. We, the other parents and I, we pulled them all away. We called the police and well, that's it. You know the rest. The detective scribbled his last note and closed the fold-top notebook he'd been writing in. His eyes were hard, dull gray stone, impossible to read. When he spoke again, his words were measured, careful. His voice was soft. "What interests me, Mr. Johnson," he said, "is that you haven't asked about your wife." The question caught me completely off guard. "My wife?" I said. "She's out of town." "Oh God, she's going to freak when she finds out what happened. She hates the block Halloween party enough as is." "Your wife is out of town?" prodded the detective. The question poked a fresh wound. "Yes," I said, forgetting my fear in a moment of irritation. "She and my son are spending the holiday with her parents in Virginia." "That seems strange," the detective said. "A family spending a holiday apart." I got the feeling he knew something more than he was letting on. "Have you talked to her?" I said. "I'd like to hear your side. My wife and I are going through a rough patch right now," I said. "But I don't see why this is relevant. It's our job to gather all the information," he said. "Then we can decide what is and is not relevant. Why was your wife not spending the holiday with you?" I sighed. I wasn't proud of it, but I was getting flustered. I could feel hot blood rising to my face. "We're separated," I said. "Why is that?" "It's personal. Your wife said that it was related to infidelity. So you have talked to her?" "Yes." "Fine," I said. "You know, I cheated on my wife. I destroyed our family. It's all my fault. Now I've had a hell of a day, so if you don't mind, can you please tell me what the fuck this has to do with anything?" The detective paused. He spoke softly. "Your wife is in police custody, Mr. Johnson." "What?" "I am sorry to have to tell you this," he said, "but she has rendered a full confession." "A full confession for what? What the hell are you talking about?" "It happens occasionally in cases of separation," he said. "One party feels the need to punish the other. Unfortunately, the children are sometimes used as a tool to that end." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The room swam. Bile rose in my throat. "Oh God," I gasped. "Oh God, no. I am afraid we have positively identified the remains as belonging to your son, Ben," he said. The scream died in my throat. I blacked out. Bigger fish. My friend and I have always known not to go into the woods around my house at night. I live in a really rural area. Like, the nearest house is about a mile away, kind of rural. I love it. I grew up in suburban areas, so living somewhere so far away from civilization is really nice and peaceful to me, most of the time. But there's an area of woods just a few minutes' walk from my home that I and my friends all knew about. We all knew something lived in those woods. God only knew what, but the people in my neighborhood knew you kept your pets indoors or fenced in. You didn't walk there. And you never went there after dark. Whatever or whoever lived in there, it never left. It's not like people and pets went missing from yards and stuff. But visitors tended to vanish. Mostly because they didn't listen to the warnings. No one's really sure what it is. We had a somewhat famous supernatural hunting crew come tromping in up there once, to try and check it out. They claimed they never found anything up there, but they also refused to spend the entire night. It's Halloween. My friend was whining at the moment, the night that the story I am about to tell you happened. You have to come out for Halloween. Stop being such a damn wet blanket. Thanks, Michelle. I groaned, putting my feet up on the table. I hate Halloween. I've always hated Halloween. I don't like being scared, and I don't like dealing with tiny brats wanting candy every 5 minutes. I just wanted to put my feet up, watch stupid comedies or something on Netflix, and relax. I don't like being scared. I don't like haunted houses. Then don't come to the haunted house. Just come to the party after. She whined, and I could practically see her bouncing up and down on her toes like a child trying to get her way. It'll be fun. Jack'll be there. Yes, that's what I want to do. Get drunk in front of Jack. I rolled my eyes. Drunk people act like idiots. She giggled on the other end of the line. So don't get drunk. Have you ever actually gotten shit-faced? Well, no. I had never. I didn't see the appeal of it, personally. Why would you want to get so damn drunk that you did God knew what, and then couldn't remember it the next day? Why would you want to end up with a massive migraine? I just didn't see how it was fun. Well, I bit my lip. Maybe it would be fun if I was careful. I was always careful. If I didn't actually get drunk. Maybe, I said. Great, perfect. I'll pick you up at 12. I said maybe. But it was too late. She already hung up on me. Oh, goddammit. I didn't have much choice now. Either I got ready to go, or she dragged me out in my PJs. Groaning, I dragged myself upright and forced myself to put something sexy on. Despite my dislike of the holiday, I did my best to be fun and flirty. I was midway through putting my makeup on when she knocked on my front door. Hold on, Michelle, I'm almost ready, okay? I called back irritably. Hurry up. It's really cold out here. Brat. I rolled my eyes as I finished putting on my lipstick, checking myself in the mirror. Danny! Michelle called again. I said hold on. I yelled back. No, Danny, Suddenly, I heard her yelp. Now, Michelle had always been a drama queen. We all knew better than to take her seriously with a lot of things, but that sounded like an honestly frightened yelp. I paused, head tilted, and listened hard. Michelle? You okay? Nothing. Michelle? Oh, hell. Now I was actually worried about the little idiot. Michelle, if you saw a goddamn snake. Danny! Her voice was scared and breathless, and when I opened the door she grabbed my arm hard. Danny, there's a guy out here. He was in the woods, just by your house. Michelle, there's no guy by the house. And even if there was, it's Halloween. People are trying to be creepy. I didn't want to let her know that she was seriously freaking me out too. Hell, for all I knew it was her intention. For all I knew, this was a stupid prank. Let's just go, okay? She was still clinging to my arm, and nodded quickly, all but dragging me to the car with her by it. I staggered behind, catching myself on the trunk of her car. No one's there, Michelle. Calm down. I swear I saw. She cut herself off, lips thinning. Can we just go? The party was everything I thought it would be. That is, boring and stressful. I don't like, and never actually liked, parties. Jake had barely noticed me in favor of the girl in the bee costume that I didn't know, and I used the word costume supremely loosely. I used the word clothing loosely, for that matter. I was pretty sure I could see her ass. But also, as I'd predicted, Michelle was plastered within the first 20 minutes, and an hour later I was dragging her drooling ass out the front door as her designated driver. She was loopy and giggling, and God, drunk people are irritating. But I loved her, so I rolled my eyes, smirked, and tolerated it. Michelle may be an idiot, but she's one of my dearest friends, and really, I didn't mind. Once I got her back to my place, she'd just pass out in the guest bedroom and I could go through with my original plans of watching Netflix and relaxing for the rest of the evening. But when I pulled her out of the car, I saw it. Around the corner of my house, in the spot where shadows met light, a figure, moving. I blinked in confusion, figuring Michelle had gotten me paranoid and jumping at shadows. And like I said, it was Halloween. If anyone was there, it was probably some stupid kid trying to spook me. Hey! Get out of here! I barked, as I walked Michelle up to my front door slowly. This is private property. There was no reply. Something in the pit of my stomach lurched. Something isn't right, my instincts told me. Don't go inside. Don't go any closer. I stopped in my tracks, frozen like a startled, spooked deer. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call the cops, mostly because I had nothing to call for. What was I going to say? Oh no, officer, someone spooked me on Halloween, the holiday of spooks. but my mind and gut were screaming at me that something was just wrong. I shifted to take a step back towards the car. Michelle, I need you to pay attention to what I'm about to say. I think someone's... Her scream cut me off and sliced the air like a knife through butter. My ears ringing, I nearly dropped her. I staggered, trying to figure out what was going on, but I didn't get the chance. We got hit from the side before I got my head on straight. Someone big, a man, wearing a clown mask. He was huge and heavy, and I couldn't get him off me. My brain had stopped working on a conscious level. I was in pure fight or flight mode. There was an enormous, powerful man on top of me, and I could see the glint of a knife in his hand. Oh God, I'm going to die, I thought, hysterically, after my brain kicked back in. I'm going to die in a slutty outfit after a Halloween party, like a stupid B-movie victim. He was bigger than me, stronger than me, and I could feel myself losing the struggle. And then there was a thud and he fell off, leaving Michelle standing there, wild-eyed and breathing fast and hard, holding a flashlight from her car. Did I kill him? She asked, then leaned over and puked immediately. I struggled to my feet. We weren't that lucky. She hadn't even knocked him unconscious. He was getting to his feet, moaning. No, Michelle, we need to run. Can you run? I grabbed at her, grabbing her arm and trying to tug her along behind me. Hell yes, I can run, she snapped. I'm drunk, not crippled. It's funny how fear and adrenaline will sober a person right the hell up. I could hear the attacker breathing hard right behind us as we bolted, his heavy footsteps not far behind, and I could tell he was gaining. Michelle could move, but she wasn't in her prime, and I had never been athletic. Fear can only carry you so far. It can only do so much. We didn't have anywhere we could run. I told you already, I live in the middle of nowhere. There was no chance we'd get to a neighbor before he caught us, and even if we did, no certainty we wouldn't end up shot by a redneck with a tendency to shoot first and ask questions later. Dead by crazy masked man, or dead by redneck, either way, not my idea of fun. I pulled my phone out, still running, panting heavily. I dialed 911, half sobbing as the operator picked up. Help me, please, I cried. My friend and I are being, there's a man. I wish I could say I was strong, clear-spoken, and calm. I wish I could say I kept my shit together and gave her an accurate description of what was happening. What I did instead was stammer like a damn fool and start sobbing. Ma'am, calm down, came the cool yet urgent voice over the line. I can't help you if I can't understand what's wrong. Someone's trying to kill us. I managed to blurt out. There's a man. He was outside my house. He's chasing my friend and I. I half expected her to call bullshit, to accuse me of playing a prank. Thank God she didn't, and took me seriously. Do you have somewhere you can go? A neighbor's house, a police station or fire station, a nearby hospital? No, I live at. I gave her my address, and no sooner had I gotten it out than, like said B-movie bimbo, I tripped. I hit the ground hard, as did my phone, which went clattering into the darkness. I didn't bother trying to reclaim it. I staggered to my feet, and kept running, Michelle screaming at me to get up the entire time. The mistake cost us precious moments. He was going to catch us. He was going to catch us. If we kept running in a straight line, he'd catch with up and then. I didn't want to think about what came next. Michelle turned left. Into the woods. I screamed. It was the first thing I could think of to do. We can't, she protested. We have to. I insisted. Danny, we can't. We don't have a choice. I was already veering up the hill, into the thick tree line. All together we bolted into the darkness of the woods everyone knew not to go into after dark, scrambling, stumbling, scraping our knees and hands, blood leaking from deep scratches. All of us, that is, except our assailant. I slammed to the ground, pulling Michelle down with me, just as I heard him tromping after us. She clamped her hands over her mouth to muffle her sobs. I was crying too, I knew I was. We clutched one another there in the shadows, trying desperately to keep quiet while footsteps marched by our hiding spot, heavy and deliberate. "I'll find you," he whispered, not yelled or screamed. "I'll find you both. You think I'm scared of your little urban legend, you inbred hicks?" He laughed, deep and raspy. "You have room to talk," I thought to myself. I could feel a hysterical giggle rising in my throat, and I clamped my own hands over my mouth to keep it back. My chest convulsed with sobs and laughter, and I could feel Michelle clutching me tighter, desperately whispering to me to shut up, asking what was wrong, terror in her subdued voice. The sound burst out of me in a choked, strangled hybrid of a laugh and a terrified yelp. I coughed it out, choked it out, and then Michelle was screaming again, and I was screaming too because I knew he'd heard me, because I'd gotten us killed. We were dead and it was my fault, all my fault. And then blood splattered across my face. For a minute, I was horrified by the idea that it was Michelle's. At first I shouted her name, horrified and grief-stricken, before I noticed that she was standing behind me, uninjured, clutching my shoulders with one hand and pointing with the other. "Oh my God. Danny, oh my God." I twisted to look at what she was pointing at. I wish, now, that I hadn't. Something stood before us. It was easily 8 feet tall, and I couldn't make out many details because of how dark it was, but I could see the deer head it had, and the horns that rose easily 5 feet high themselves, if not more. Something hung from the prongs, moss, or something else, trailing down almost to the ground. The body seemed to be human enough, but the legs and feet were deer or goat-like. The long, thin, fur-rimmed tail that trailed behind it, complete with a tufted tip, seemed like it belonged on a unicorn or kirin, or some other mythical creature. It was easily as lengthy as the creature was tall. The hands that held our attacker were more like claws, the nails so thin and razor-sharp. Sharp enough to have torn his head off without effort, apparently, because that's exactly what it had done. It tossed the corpse aside, then bent down, until its head was level with mine. Hot breath from its nose blew into my face. It smelled like rot, and mold, and mud, and dirt. I'll be honest. Everything that happened after that is a blur that I don't remember well. Michelle said I passed out, and that it walked away, leaving her a sobbing wreck on the ground beside me. She said the cops finally showed up 20 minutes later. The next few weeks were a mixed-up mess of questionings from the cops, and of attention from the media and people trying to get us to appear on news and talk shows, or ghost hunting, supernatural programs. Michelle ate it up. She's always loved attention and being in the spotlight. Me? Not so much. For my part, I guess I just needed to get this out. To tell the story for real, with no frills or embellishments, not to a screaming crowd or nosy, stupid teenager thinking he's going to catch the next Bigfoot on film. My friend and I have always known not to go into the woods around my house at night,